Okay.
So,
That light right there by you, that switch was dim.
Mr. Stevens, how are things going today?
Thank you.
Have a seat, have a seat. Have a seat.
Yes, sir. I was just going over some of these reports.
How's the family? How's your family? Have you heard from your wife lately?
Yeah, well, I've heard from other people. I've heard there might be some carrying on going on. I can't wait to get back to them.
We're
As soon as
gonna,
we take care of these daggum southern scalawags.
we're gonna cut through these rebels as fast as we can so you can go back home to your wife.
I'm hoping so. I mean, whatever it takes, it don't matter.
I got a feeling. I've been hearing some good things. I've been hearing some really positive things that this war might be over
Yeah, I've read over some of these records.
faster than before the end of the year.
They're trying to cut through the hog fat, and I guarantee you, I mean that.
What's the first dispatch that we got?
Well, there's one here from Roswell, Georgia.
Roswell,
You hear
Georgia.
the Georgia? You hear the, I reckon you hear the Georgia.
There ain't nothing but success up in that place. Tell me a little bit about Roswell, Georgia.
I'm going to read it to you.
Great, come in.
All right, Union General Kenneth Gerard entered Roswell, Georgia in July 1864 to find a large, pardon me,
Carry
to
on.
find a large cotton mill in operation. The mill produced cloth uniforms for the Confederate Army. The mill was operated by 400 women and small children.
Obviously terrorists.
I'm thinking they are. After the factory was burned to the ground, Sherman notified his superior general, Henry Halleck. Henry Halleck. Like I might have gone to school with him.
That's an honorable man.
Yes, sir.
What? Tell me more.
Henry Halleck in Washington, Sherman noted that the women were tainted with treason, like terrorists, and should be as much governed by the rules of war as if in the ranks.
He said what? Say that again. Repeat what he said.
They're tainted with treason.
Tainted with treason.
Tainted with treason, and should be treated much by the rules of war as if they were in the ranks. Ain't no difference between soldier and civilian in this conflict.
They are in the ranks. Continue on.
They're rank. Well, the whole region was devoted to manufacturers, and I will destroy every one of them, factory and worker alike, black or white, to force their traitor soldiers to relent. And added the next day, whenever these people get in the way, simply ship them to a new country north and west. General Sherman ordered 110 wagons to the site to transport the women away from the site. They were arrested for treason, first held at Georgia Military Institute at Marietta, Georgia.
What they seized these women and children
Took them.
and took them away.
Or they couldn't do no more harm. They can't make no more uniforms.
There should be no quarter. Continue on. Carry
Sounds
on.
like they're doing a good job with that. They were then transported by rail to Louisville, Kentucky.
Look, that's my hometown.
Is it?
Read more about it.
About 2 weeks after their arrest, they were housed and seized in a seized building on Broadway between 12th and 13th Streets, and in a newly constructed building between 10th and 11th Street.
I know exactly where that is.
Others were sent across the Ohio River to Indiana. The women cursed General Sherman for taking them so far from their homes. The prisoners slept on the floor with no covering. The officers responsible for their medical care was none other than Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, moment of silence, Dr. Mary T. Walker.
Mary T. Walker. Mary T. Walker.
Mary T. Walker.
Congressional Medal of Honor winner. And a patron of this grand republic. Continue on.
Mary Walker, when passing a 2-year-old child, one of the prisoners said, "Get out of my way, you little brat," and kicked the child down a flight of wooden stairs. Relief societies from Louisville did what they could to aid the ladies, but their efforts were blocked by Dr. Walker. On Christmas Day, some of the prisoners waved at nearby Confederate soldiers as
They're
captured.
obviously sending signals.
I would imagine this were
You can't,
planning their escape.
you can't trust those people.
I know. For that infraction, Dr. Walker had them placed in a dungeon for the remainder of the Christmas holiday. Should have left them there for the remainder of time.
What's happening in Andersonville?
We all know what's happening.
No remorse. No remorse. Carry on.
First housed and fed in a Louisville refugee. Women later took refugee camp. The women later took what menial jobs and living arrangements could be found. Those in Indiana struggled to survive, many settling near the river, where eventually mills provided employment. Unless husbands had been transported with the women or had been imprisoned nearby, there was little probability of a return to Roswell. So the remaining women began to marry and bear children. The tragedy, widely publicized at the time, with outrage expressed in northern as well as southern presses, was virtually forgotten over the next century. As the war closed, prisoners were released in small groups and directed to find their way home. Many never returned to Roswell, but they probably liked it up there, up north.
Why would they want to go back? Once they've seen the promised land of Kentucky and southern Indiana, the great people of southern Indiana, Jeffersonville, New Albany, I know where those places
I
are.
passed through there.
There'd be no reason to come back to
Fine.
Secessionville.
There's another section here, Major, about March through Georgia.
March through Georgia.
Let's have it.
Tell me a little bit about the march through the
All
great state of Georgia.
Well, he made it howl, didn't he? General Sherman wrote to his commander, Henry Halleck, in 1863, "Can we help the South? If we can, our numerical majority has both the natural and constitutional right to govern. If we cannot whip them, they contend for us for the natural right to select their own government. To prevent that, we will remove and destroy every obstacle, if need be, take every life, every acre of land, every particle of property, everything that to us seems proper." A year later, he told Halleck that it would be a tract of desolation.
He said what?
It would be a tract of desolation they'd leave behind.
The state of Georgia.
Yes.
Should have stayed. They picked the wrong side.
Continue on. It's funny, pick the wrong side.
Picked the wrong side.
It would be a tract of desolation. As the Union troops traveled through Georgia, locals said they took everything that was not red hot or nailed down. Federal officers offered residents to insure their houses protection from theft and burning for a price, while Federal General Oliver O. Howard sat at the table of Louise Cornwell's home near Milledgeville, Georgia. Having dinner with the lady, he piously asked God's blessings as her gin house, blacksmith shop, and stored cotton burner. Bedridden, 27 years old Kate L. Nichols was at her home near Milledgeville when two federal officers forced their way past her servant and raped her. She later died in a mental institution. Sherman retaliated against civilians and towns in brutal response to military actions against his troops. Military actions.
Our honorable president said, if you will stop this madness, come back into the Union, we can all get along. But they brought this war on themselves.
And you could tell they continued to conspire against us even when they were laid low. In war, everything is right which prevents anything. If bridges were burned, I have the right to burn all houses near it. Sherman ordered, should guerrillas or bushwhackers molest our march, or should inhabitants burn bridges, obstruct roads, or otherwise manifest local hostility, then Army commanders should order and enforce a devastation more or less relentless. One of Sherman's officers stated, "This army will not be trifled with. If citizens play guerrilla against us, neither youth, nor age, nor sex will be respected. Everything must be destroyed. We have gone too far in our triumphal march that we will not be balked," Sherman estimated. He was determined, wasn't he?
We have got to end the war.
All that is necessary to have victory. His path of destruction to have, he estimated his path of destruction to have been 40 miles wide and said, "As we have left the country, I do not see how the people can live for the next 2 years," Sherman calculated. The damage is at $100 million. 80% simple waste and destruction. Now, after his proud victories in Georgia, he headed back into South Carolina.
In South Carolina. Tell us about what happened in South Carolina.
Well, Sherman in South Carolina. Well, his General William, this is about Sherman himself. General William T. Sherman wrote the following letters to his superiors, General Grant and Chief of Staff Halleck, while at his headquarters at the Green Meldrum House in Savannah, Georgia.
In Savannah, Georgia? He captured Savannah, Georgia. The hostess city of the South. Imagine that.
His words reflect the sentiment of his forces and what impending doom would be unleashed on South Carolina in the coming days. I do sincerely believe that the whole United States, North and South, would rejoice to have this army turned loose on South Carolina, to devastate that state in a manner we have done in Georgia. Justifiable vengeance.
I have. You're a Christian man.
Well, of course I am.
Do you have a problem with what's been happening?
To serve the cause of keeping the Union and freeing the slaves, well, I'll call them slaves. Everything that is necessary is justified.
I value your opinion. That's why I asked you that question. Because soldiers have come to me. Soldiers have come to me and they've asked me that question. And I've known you all my life. And I just wanted to know what you personally think.
Those soldiers that came to you, you don't suppose they're collaborating or maybe mixing it up with those women?
I don't believe so. I just believe that they're trouble.
And there's usually something poison at the root of stuff like that.
I believe, Jim, I just believe they're trouble.
Well,
But I know that you're a deacon in the church. I'm not a God-fearing man, and you know that. But you're a deacon in the church. Tell me what the book says. Are we doing right?
well, you probably know what's in the Old Testament. How God's people rode through the pagan and the backwards countries and didn't leave a thing in their wake. They killed every man, woman, child, and beast. Destroyed every idol, everything they had, so that they could not come back and be what they were. They could only begin to emulate their conquerors.
Now, Jim, I know the people of Georgia think they have it bad. Is there anything else?
Yes, sir. There is.
Continue on.
He's bragging about how he's going to tear up South Carolina just the same way he did in Georgia. To Halleck on Christmas Eve, he wrote, "We are not only fighting hostile armies, but a hostile people. And we must make old and young, rich and poor feel the hard hand of war. The truth is, the whole army is burning with an insatiable desire to wreak vengeance on South Carolina."
South Carolina started this war.
Well, that's where
They
it comes
started the
from. They
war.
attacked our fort.
They attacked the fort. They were the first ones to go out. We tried to reason with those people, and they wouldn't listen. They understand one thing.
It's all coming home now. It's all coming to their home.
One thing.
Steal the cattle and live. It says, I almost trembled at her fate, meaning South Carolina, but feel that she deserves all that seems in store for her. On February 1st, 1865, Sherman's army crossed the Savannah River and entered the town of Hardeeville, South Carolina.
Hardeeville, South Carolina.
Hardeeville.
Would that be the same General Hardee that they talk so much about?
I would imagine that's got a lot to do with it.
Maybe that might be a good place to start.
Well, the town's church was first destroyed as a Christian. It could not have been a true temple to my God with these people who believe the things that they do and have the loyalties to the things that they have loyalties to.
From a military standpoint, a church is a meeting place. A church is an observation point. We will take out the church. That is a meeting place and an observation point. Observation points of the enemy will be destroyed.
The town's church was first destroyed, brutalizing the local people by hanging them to force their reveal of their hiding places for valuables, and had been practiced used throughout the march. Well, they did that all throughout Georgia. As entire towns were put to the torch, columns of black smoke could be seen in a 30-mile area. Federal General Judson Kilpatrick sent a recommendation to his superior, General Sherman.
Now, my nephew is riding with Judson Kilpatrick right now. Tell me how that young man is doing. Tell me what his commander's doing.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm proud today. Let's see, his recommendation to General Sherman was that they rename the city of Barnwell, South Carolina, to Burnwell.
Hey,
I reckon it was all maybe built out of fat wire, wasn't it?
that's poetic justice right there. What else they have to say?
In South Carolina,
The fine people of South Carolina.
In South Carolina, the Federals began a practice of the war on dogs. You'll like this one.
You know I'm not a dog lover. So.
Well, this ain't going to help you. Union officers believed that Southerners were using dogs to track escaped Federal prisoners. The killing of any dog found began, and household pets that were shot in front of their children. Foodstuffs were poured onto the ground and destroyed and carried off by the raiders with the planned intent to starve the inhabitants to death.
Raiders? They use the word raider?
I'm afraid they did.
Those are supply gatherers.
Foragers.
Foragers. Exactly.
Certainly.
Raiders?
The Army must survive to carry out its mission.
I don't agree with it. Strike that raiders part out.
I'll remember to. I'll do it, sir. They mix salt with barrel.
So they're calling my nephew a raider.
A raider.
No, that. Make sure you strike that out, because that will not go forward.
Yes, sir, I will. They mix salt with barrels of syrup and spit tobacco into sorghum. One raider, he said it again. What do you got me to change that to? Crusaders? Something like that? Soldiers? Just, I'll think of something that is indicative of the honor.
How about scout?
All right, sir.
Intelligence gatherer.
Yes, sir. One of the raiders, one of the intelligence gatherers told the lady, if some feller will come along and taste the sorghum and think you poisoned him, then he'll burn your damn old house. Here's another word here. I'll replace it with scout. One marauder left one chicken for an old woman and her grandchildren and said, "You have this one for dinner." Wait just a minute. Only to return asking if she had cooked it. When she said she did, he took the chicken and pan, thanking her for preparing his supper.
So he left one chicken for the Secesh woman, and she cooked it up, and he went back at supper time, and he claimed the chicken from the family. You know what that's ingenuity.
Oh yeah.
That's ingenuity.
Thinking outside of the box.
That's right.
That's what that is.
That's right.
When Sherman moved into Orangeburg, South Carolina, the inhabitants, mostly women, piled their clothes and bedding out into the street to try and save what they could. Sherman passed the rumor that a Jew merchant had started a fire, but he put it out. Orangeburg was on fire when he left. A schoolgirl, Elizabeth Alston, was asked by a Union officer, "Do you know what you are fighting for?" To which she replied, "Existence." Well, I couldn't say it better. I couldn't say it better myself. She just wanted to survive.
She's fighting for her existence.
Right.
Okay.
She wanted to go back and start her life owning slaves and being rebellious.
So what did our fine officer tell her?
He grinned and said, "We won't let you have it. In 4 months, we'll have the Confederacy on its knees." Elizabeth fired back and said, "You must kill every man, woman, and child." To which the captain said, "We'll do that too." At the beginning of this war, I didn't give a care about a nigger, but I'd rather enlist for 10 years longer than let the South have her independence. We'll starve you out. Not in one place that we have visited have we left 3 meals. Terror like this was dealt out in heavy doses to cities and towns in the invasion path. But Confederate forces were on occasion able to inflict damage to the invaders. Near Aiken, South Carolina, Confederate cavalry came up upon a preacher standing in front of his home sobbing. "My daughter, a bunch of Yankees raped her. They just left here."
Raped her? That's not possible.
Imagine that at the very least you led them on.
That's not possible. But continue on with the report.
The troopers rode and quickly rounded up the foragers. One of the Federals, wounded, begged for his life, saying he had nothing to do with the crime. The Confederates spared him, but executed the others. Confederate cavalry General James Chestnut was told of the home of the M's. The M's had been ransacked. 7 Federals found only Mrs. M and her teenage daughter at home. They tied up the mother and proceeded in her presence to rape the daughter. When the Confederates arrived, the daughter was dead, and the mother was out of her mind. The Confederates tracked them down, shot them, slit their throats, and left their bodies with a sign that read, "Here are the 7." Ohio Sergeant Arthur McCarty was the only Federal soldier to be convicted by his peers of rape in the Carolina campaign. 3 of his peers testified that McCarty, near Bennettsville, South Carolina, raped a teenage girl in front of her parents. The sergeant was sentenced to 2 years in prison. You'll enjoy this. This sentence was later dismissed by President Andrew Johnson. One of the truly ironic facts is that Chief of Staff Halleck, as General Sherman's superior, and who oversaw the conduct of the operation and was responsible for all Federal forces, wrote the Book of Elements of International Law and Laws of War, which stated, "An officer is generally responsible for the acts of those under his orders, unless he can control his soldiers He is unfit. If he cannot control his soldiers, he is unfit to command.
Unfit.
Unfit.
Those are,
There's some information here you might want to share.
those are reports from Georgia, yes. Well, Georgia doesn't have it so bad, believe it or not.
Well, you got other places that
There's other places that have seen a little bit more, how should we say, activity in Georgia. You might not know this, but Missouri, as required by Missouri law, the state militia trained under the U.S. flag in 1861 at a place called Camp Jackson near Liddell Grove, Missouri, under the command of General David Frost. The local federal commander, Captain Nathan Lyon, feared that the local federal arsenal nearby was going to be raided by the state militia and ordered it emptied and the contents taken to Illinois. Lyon enlisted nearly 7,000 newly arrived German immigrants to serve under him. On May 1861, this force was marched to and surrounded Camp Jackson, forcing its surrender. The capture of the 689 prisoners were marched back through the streets of St. Louis. Angry citizens began to throw rocks at the Germans, who lowered their rifles and fired into the crowd. When it was over, 2 days later, 37 civilians lay dead in St. Louis. Thousands of civilians fled the city in fear of more violence. 1 week after the St. Louis massacre, Captain Lyons was promoted to Brigadier General. In December of 1861, General Henry Halleck, commander of the Department of Missouri, issued the order that individuals known to be hostile to the Union would be taxed to proportion. Individuals known to be hostile to the Union would be taxed in proportion to the guilt and property of such the individual.
To make examples of them?
Those assessed had 1 week to appeal and to prove their loyalty. If they failed to do so, the amount increased 10%. Anyone who could not pay cash to settle this tax would have their property seized.
Hesitates is lost, or at least he's going to the poorhouse.
They would have their property seized and everything auctioned. Anyone who resisted these orders would face imprisonment. Guerrilla bands began to form throughout the state to combat this. In July of 1862, general orders were posted requiring every able-bodied man to join the enrolled militia of Missouri. Exemptions could be made if the individual would pay a fee. Exemptions, those citizens deemed disloyal were assessed to a huge fee that would help finance the organization. Later, General Order 19 forbid weapons or ammunition to be in the hands of anyone not loyal to the enrolled militia. Thousands of dollars of loyalty fees were extorted from Missouri citizens. General Order number 35, issued 24 December 1862, required provost marshals to arrest and take evidence any persons guilty of disloyal conduct. Guilt was assumed prior to arrest and without any need for evidence. Dr. Joseph McDowell of St. Louis spoke out in favor of the Confederacy. I have no idea why. He had his property seized and turned into a prison. 2 women from Haynesville, Missouri were arrested for refusing to swear allegiance to the Union. More than 18 newspapers in the state were shut down for voicing public opposition.
Are these people so ignorant they cannot see the handwriting on the wall?
You have to understand who's in charge. By spring of 1863, the government decreed that only those loyal to the Union will be allowed to conduct business or grow crops. In the rural parts of the state, crime was so rampant that the area was abandoned. Kansas Brigadier General James Lane said, "We believe in a war of extermination. I want to see every foot of ground and